Chapter 7. Fats that make you lean, fats that make you fat. The consumption of a Western diet, one composed primarily of processed food, has over the last century resulted in an epidemic of obesity, with over two-thirds of Americans being overweight or obese. But what you might not know is that you can look thin on the outside yet still be fat. Huh? It's true. This is a condition where you have an unhealthy amount of body fat, but instead of the so-called subcutaneous fat, which is just underneath the skin, and is the fat you love to hate on your upper arms, thighs, or backside, the fat is deposited in areas where it shouldn't be and where you can't use it, such as in and around your liver and pancreas. The hidden fat is called visceral fat because it surrounds your internal organs, aka the viscera. And this kind of fat is far more harmful than the jiggly fat on your arms or hips. People casually call this TOFI, thin outside, fat inside. And in the scientific research world, it is termed normal weight obesity, which hints at exactly what it is. You can be at a normal weight, you have abnormal blood work, and the kinds of metabolic problems doctors would expect in an obese person. Worldwide, the median prevalence of fatty liver disease is 20%. However, between 33% and 46% of American adults have fatty liver disease, which interferes with the many critical functions the liver performs, especially blood sugar regulation. With this in mind, it shouldn't surprise you that 52% of adults in the U.S. are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Since fat building up in the liver is a major contributor to type 2 diabetes, if this issue isn't resolved soon, the economic burden of these health issues will likely bankrupt the nation quicker than you can say French fries. Certain fats are far more likely than others to result in storing harmful visceral fat, but the problem isn't just the storage of this fat. It's when stored, fat shifts from an anti-inflammatory state to a pro-inflammatory state. Stored body fat isn't inert. It doesn't just sit there quietly like an innocent bystander while the rest of your body goes about its business. Think of stored fat as an endocrine gland that sends signaling molecules to the rest of your body, or better yet, think of it like a radio station. Stored fat broadcasts messages that are received by other parts of the body, which do what the messages tell them to do. For example, this stored fat might tell your blood vessels to constrict, leading to elevated blood pressure. The change in fat from an anti-inflammatory state to a pro-inflammatory state results in chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, and the cellular messengers called cytokines that are released by inflamed fat cells influence a host of disease states that reads like a who's who of the chronic conditions that plague millions of Americans. Insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular disease. And those are just the biggies. Inflammatory cytokines also contribute to issues that are less devastating but still unpleasant, such as acne, dry skin, and menstrual cramps. A good marker of inflammatory fat is the amount of fat stored in your liver, which is increased by three main dietary factors: refined sugar, mostly in the form of added sugars like sucrose, table sugar, and high fructose corn syrup, but also sugars you might consider natural, such as 100% fruit juice. Number 2, industrial seed oils, cottonseed, safflower, soybean, corn, and sunflower oils. Number 3, low intake of omega-3 fats, particularly EPA and DHA. Of those three factors, consuming industrial seed oils is likely the worst offender for shifting body fat from being anti-inflammatory to pro-inflammatory. but as always, it's compounded by a low intake of omega-3 fats, particularly EPA and DHA, but also ALA. When your body is in a chronic state of low-grade inflammation, it's like a barbecue grill where the coals are still hot and smoldering and occasional embers get tossed around. If you consume excess omega-6 seed oils on top of this, it's like someone coming along and pouring gasoline on the red-hot coals. With fuel added to the fire, it'll rage out of control. In order to repair the situation, you need to change your dietary fat intake so you can start to cool the fire within. As we explained in Chapter 4, a small amount of acute controlled inflammation is healthy and actually necessary for optimum biological function. It's only long-term chronic unresolved inflammation that you need to worry about. And while many things contribute to this kind of inflammation, a high intake of omega-6 fat paired with too little omega-3 ranks near the top of the list. How can you tell if you have harmful hidden inflammatory fat? Work with your doctor to identify signs of fatty liver disease, as liver fat is a good measure of whether you have hidden inflammatory fat elsewhere in your body. Later we'll discuss strategies to reduce your risk of accumulating inflammatory fat and help you decrease inflammatory fat if you already have it. Here's a summary of healthy versus harmful fat. Harmful fat. Ectomic fat with local effects. Fat in and around the kidneys and heart muscle, which mostly affects these areas. Ectomic fat with systemic effects. Fat in and around the liver, pancreas, and skeletal muscles, which affects your whole body. Healthy fat. Subcutaneous fat, the fat just below your skin. The visible fat you typically think of as body fat. Omega-3 deficient fat is inflamed fat. Inflamed, visceral, and subcutaneous fat have a deficit of the resolvins and protectins that help neutralize and protect against inflammation. Patients with peripheral vascular disease have markedly inflamed fat with a shortage of these DHA-derived compounds. One study found that metabolites from DHA are potent pro-resolving mediators that counteract both local cytokine production. When your stored body fat is deficient in omega-3s, there's nothing to put the brakes on the inflammatory signals it sends out. On the other hand, if your fat tissue had enough omega-3s, it might be able to keep its own inflammatory state in check. Fat tissue that's low in omega-3s is made even more inflammatory because of the enzyme that inactivates these specialized inflammation-cooling compounds is unregulated in fat tissue. This means there's more inflammation combined with a lower capacity to control it. It's almost as if somebody started a fire and firefighters are on their way to the scene. But as the fire grows and spreads, the firefighters somehow get word that they're not needed, so they return to the firehouse. The inflammation is still there and getting worse, but now your body is blocked from doing anything about it. Restoring omega-3s in obese animals has been shown to reverse the deficiency of omega-3 pro-resolving compounds and shift the fat tissue to an anti-inflammatory state. Giving resolvins or protectin precursors from DHA to obese and diabetic mice improves insulin resistance and fat tissue, reduces the expression of inflammatory signals, improves glucose tolerance while also lowering fasting glucose levels, all of which improve overall metabolic health. Results from studies in mice and other animals don't automatically translate to humans, but they do provide useful information that we can formulate ideas from. So they're worth paying attention to. Bottom line, compounds that are made from DHA help to reduce inflammation through multiple pathways, and when inflammation is reduced in this way at the cellular level by changing the types of molecules different tissues secrete, your body's overall state of inflammation is reduced, which means reduced risk for developing a debilitating condition, driven by chronic systemic inflammation, or improvement of symptoms if you're already living with one or more of these. Researchers have said that boosting the production of anti-inflammatory compounds from omega-3 fats is an important part of a strategy to combat inflammation in fat tissue. An adequate supply of DHA and EPA ensures that your body has a pool of raw material from which to create these compounds. These anti-inflammatory compounds are so powerful that you shouldn't be surprised if pharmaceutical companies eventually develop medications derived from them that can be delivered via injection directly into visceral fat stores. If they ever do, though, no doubt they'll cost a fortune. So your best bet is simply to cut back on vegetable oils and eat more clean seafood or take high-quality fish or krill oil supplements. Omega-6 drives obesity and inflamed fat. Did you know that each of your fat cells can expand nearly 1,000-fold in volume and 10-fold in diameter? They're like balloons that can fill, and fill some more without popping. Only instead of being filled with helium, your fat cells are filled with, well, fat of course. The expansion of your fat cells is driven in part by chronic low-grade inflammation, which can be assessed by the presence of inflammatory compounds in your blood. These inflammatory compounds are like messages that tell your fat cells to suck up fat and hold on to it. And think about this for a second. We haven't said anything about calories or carbs here. They aren't really the problem. The dysregulation in your fat cells, which makes them hoard fat and hold on tight, is driven mostly by the kind of fat you eat, the kind of fat that gets incorporated into your fat cells, and the kinds of signals it sends out. Where do these inflammatory compounds come from? One of the main sources is the omega-6 linoleic acid, LA, in your fat stores. As you know, out of all the different types of fat stored in your fat cells, LA is the most prevalent, and it is susceptible to conversion to pro-inflammatory mediators called oxidized LA metabolites, also known as oxalams. The massive increase in LA in the Western diet and in people's body fat has paralleled the rise in chronic disease in the U.S., including obesity and type 2 diabetes. Not surprising considering what you know about LA encouraging the storage of fat. But all hope is not lost. Supplementation with a special type of fat called gamma linoleic acid, GLA, from borage oil has been shown to reduce some of these fat storing signals in as little as 2 weeks. Other ways to decrease these signals include consuming more EPA and DHA and more oleic acid found in olive oil, avocados, and macadamia nuts, as well as cutting back on LA. Avoiding processed foods full of corn, soybean, and cottonseed oils is a small price to pay for eating delicious foods that are high in healthy fats, and maybe even losing weight in the process. In case you're feeling a little overwhelmed at this point, here are some simple ways to reduce inflammatory body fat. Reduce intake of industrial seed oils. Increase intake of GLA. Increase intake of oleic acid. Increase intake of healthy omega-3 fats. Concerned about weight loss? If improving omega-6 to omega-3 ratio can help improve some of the adverse effects of inflammation and insulin resistance, it's possible that maintaining a proper ratio might even serve to outright prevent some of the illnesses that stem from these issues. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So don't wait until you're already sick to start paying attention to how much omega-6 and omega-3 you're eating. Getting the right balance of these fats in your diet should become a daily habit, like brushing your teeth. It may take some effort at first, but after a while it'll be second nature and you won't even have to think about it. What about alpha linoleic acid, ALA? We've emphasized EPA and DHA because these long-chain Marine fats are the most potent of the omega-3s, and they perform various functions ALA simply isn't capable of. But that doesn't mean the plant source parent omega-3 is not biologically useful. Far from it. Research suggests ALA helps stimulate the burning of fat for fuel in muscle cells as well as in fat cells themselves. If you struggle to lose weight, don't underestimate the importance of getting the right kinds of fat in your diet. This is especially important if you have a hard time kicking a sweet tooth. In a study of mice fed a diet high in fat, 60% of total calories from fat, and relatively high in sugar, 17.6% of total calories. At the end of the study, the mice whose dietary fat came mostly from soybean oil weighed the most, while the mice who were fed mostly fish oil weighed the least. In order from highest to lowest body weight, the oils that made up most of the diet were soybean, palm, lard, canola, safflower, perilla, and fish oil. Yes, you read that correctly. Soybean oil, one of the omega-6 vegetable oils we've been encouraged to eat, made mice fatter than lard did. Perilla and fish oil, which are high in omega-3s, made mice the leanest. But it gets even worse. Among the different fats tested, the ones highest in omega-6, linoleic acid, were positively associated with higher blood glucose levels, meaning the more linoleic acid the mice ate, the higher their blood sugar. After being given a large dose of sugar, the mice that were fed safflower oil, made up of a whopping 78% linoleic acid, had the highest glucose area under the curve, while the mice that were fed fish oil had the lowest. This suggests that compared to a diet high in omega-6 fats, a diet high in long-chain omega-3s, EPA and DHA, may help to mitigate weight gain and blood sugar elevations caused by a diet high in sugar. These noteworthy findings have been replicated in other studies. For example, rats fed fish oil had less total body fat, less intra-abdominal visceral fat, and less insulin resistance than those fed corn oil or lard. Mouse studies show that long-chain omega-3 fats increase fat burning inside fat cells and inhibit fat cell growth and proliferation. In other words, while omega-6 heavy oils contribute to obesity and higher blood sugar, long-chain omega-3s are anti-obesogenic. Family tree of fat. In case you thought this was all about you, let's take a minute to talk about your children and grandchildren. The number of fat cells an individual has is determined during childhood and adolescence. Large numbers of animal studies clearly show that omega-6 fats increase the formation of fully developed fat cells from preadipocytes, fat cell precursors, leading to increased fat accumulation, whereas omega-3 fats have the opposite effect. Pregnant and breastfeeding mice fed omega-3 ALA, even in the presence of omega-6, had offspring with lower total body weight, lower body fat, and smaller individual fat cells compared to offsprings from mice fed a high omega-6 diet without ALA. Okay, that's good to know for mice. What about in humans? In humans, mothers with high blood levels of omega-6 had children with increased body fat at 4 and 6 years of age, whereas higher maternal omega-3 levels were correlated with greater lean mass. So mothers with high omega-6 levels compared to omega-3 during pregnancy will simply have fatter children than women with lower omega-6 to 3 ratios. In the previous chapter, we detailed how a pregnant woman's omega-6 and omega-3 intake can influence her child's health, especially mental health, into adolescence and even later in life. It seems the same is true for setting children up for an easier time maintaining a healthy weight or for putting them on the path to fight their own body's tendency to hoard fat. A study called Project Viva showed that a higher omega-6 to 3 ratio in the maternal diet and in cord blood correlates with increased child obesity. When moms have more omega-3 fats in their bodies, and these fats are passed along to their babies, the babies are less likely to be overweight during childhood. If you're pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant, please be sure to determine your omega-3 status to give your child the best start he or she can get toward lifelong metabolic health. It's often said that obesity is genetic or that it runs in families. The things that really run in families are dietary and lifestyle habits. So it's true that there's a familial aspect to it, but there doesn't appear to be an obesity gene. However, the stage is set in the womb, driven by the good fats and bad fats in mom's diet, so that regardless of what kind of diet you follow now, your literal formative months may have made it harder or easier to maintain a healthy weight as an adult. Remember, though, you don't need to worry so much about consuming excessive omega-6 from whole, unprocessed foods such as nuts and seeds, where these fragile fatty acids are protected by antioxidants and other phytonutrients that keep them from being damaged by rancidity and oxidation. The omega-6s you want to avoid are the ones in liquid oils and the processed foods that contain these oils: soybean, corn, safflower, cottonseed, and sunflower. Read the labels at the supermarket, and you'll find these oils in just about everything, but some of the worst offenders are salad dressings, mayonnaise, margarine, and imitation butters made from plant oils, frosting, crackers, cookies, cakes, almost all baked goods in fact, peanut butter, microwave meals, and more. Marine omega-3s and fat loss. If you've ever struggled to lose weight or know someone who has, then you know it's not as easy as the experts make it sound. Plenty of people dutifully follow the often parroted advice to eat less and move more. To no avail. They mercilessly remove every visible molecule of fat from their food and spend precious hours whittling away time on a treadmill or elliptical machine only to see little to no change in their weight or shape. Frustrating is an understatement. People who face an uphill battle to lose weight can use every bit of help they can get. Considering the role of omega-3 fats in improving insulin sensitivity and reducing inflammation, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that these wondrous molecules can be an ace in the hole for fat loss. Many animal studies have found greater lean mass gains, muscle, bone, connective tissue, lower fat mass, and intra-abdominal fat gains, increased insulin sensitivity, and increased metabolic rate with diets higher in fish oil compared to other types of fats, such as vegetable oils, olive oil, lard, and beef tallow. These results occurred despite each of the fats providing the same number of calories, meaning when it comes to weight loss, the type of fat you eat is just as important or maybe even more important than the total amount. Even when added as extra calories in addition to a diet already high in saturated fat and omega-6 fats, omega-3 fish oils help to reduce the growth of fat cells and the deposition of dangerous visceral fat. In a study that followed obese women eating a very low-calorie diet, subjects who took fish oil supplements experienced greater weight loss and larger reductions of body mass index and hip circumference compared to subjects who followed the same diet but not take fish oil. Omega-3 seem to boost your body's overall efficiency at fat burning. It's not just the overall metabolism that runs better, it's the burning of fats specifically. Remember, if you want to lose body fat, then that's what you've got to burn, fat. It does no good to burn more carbohydrates. The study authors concluded the results suggest that EPA and DHA enhance weight loss in obese females treated by a very low-calorie diet. DHA more than EPA seems to be the active component, the part of this that matters in the real world. Adding EPA and DHA to low-calorie diets may help people lose more fat than dieting alone, and of the specific compounds that are responsible for this effect, DHA is the most powerful. What about if you're already healthy? Can omega-3 fats still be of benefit for helping to maintain a healthy body weight? Even with no change to your diet or exercise habits, consuming more marine omega-3s can still have a beneficial effect on your body composition. And whereas the omega-3s offer benefits, omega-6s actually have adverse effects. When it comes to improving your health, losing weight is not as important as losing fat. So it's important to measure body fat percentage than it is to measure scale weight. Marine oils win here too. Again, the absolute changes were small, but in one study, subjects who took fish oil lost body fat, while subjects taking safflower oil gained it. Resting metabolic rate, the amount of energy of calories your body burns even while you're lying around doing nothing, was increased in the fish oil group but decreased in the safflower oil group. Fish oil added to weight loss diets has been found to cause greater reductions in weight and waist circumference than the same diet without fish oil.